Hello, hello, welcome everybody. I'm Jev, yes, Triple V. The accent, by the way, is purely Kiwi. I read old stories for children, so we keep this a family-friendly channel by having bad word blockers, banning bots, and preventing spam. So that means new followers need to wait a few minutes before they can join in the chat. Since these stories are so old, they're now in the public domain, which means they are free to read for anyone and by anyone, the way many Christmas songs are. The digital versions I read are from Project Gutenberg, and you'll find the link for that below. The physical ones are just old books my family has lying around. Sometimes I'll even show them to you. These, by the way, are live reads. Think of them as bedtime stories rather than actual audiobooks. You get the benefits of my mistakes, distractions, explanations, and terrible attempts at accents, along with plenty of chat and interruptions as we find out about things in the story. If you need to do work or chores, then that's fine. Just come and lurk. Please adjust your volume to suit. There are captions available if you have to be quiet or you have hearing challenges, but be warned, sometimes the captions aren't always that accurate. I am a member of the Codex, an awesome group of reading streamers on Twitch. People from many walks of life who share their love of reading, and you'll find links to the Codex reading team and our Discord server below. A special feature of the Codex Discord is the security channel for those of you who stream or moderate. You'll find lots of practical, useful information to help keep your stream and your community safe. So, hang around and come discover adventure with me. You never know what we'll find. Right, hi, I think I'm here. Catching my breath. Yeah, 2 flights of stairs. I figured it out the other day. Our stairs are the equivalent of 3 flights of stairs anywhere else. So yeah, when I have to go downstairs and then come back up, it's a fair way. And lighting, I have no idea what's going on with it. I tried tweaking it and adjusting it, but it's not really doing normal things. Technology, eh? Great stuff. Right. Before we go further, how about we have a tips video? Just to let people know a little, give people a flavour of what it's like around here, but also know some things that they may actually find useful for being in the space to enjoy it and make the most of it. So here we go. Let's have a tip video. Hang on. This one. And we'll see how long it takes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Hello, and welcome to the stream. I'm Jev. Now, let's talk about our 6 things to enjoy the stream. Number 1, get your drink. It can be water, whatever you like, but, take care of yourself and hydrate. Number 2, when I hydrate, you should as well. Did you hydrate just now? Number 2, get snacks or maybe a whole meal. It depends on your time of day and your own habits. Again, take care of yourself. Be hydrated and eat what you need to eat. Number 4, get comfy, whether it's cooler or warmer, just something to cuddle perhaps. But be comfortable. That's also important. It's good physically and mentally. Number 5, have something to write with and write on. It can be paper, it can be anything you like. Memo, post-it notes, whatever you like. This advert not associated with post-it notes in any way, shape, or form. Disclaimer. Now, sit back, listen, and enjoy. Feel free to engage in chat. Do the puzzle over here or, down there somewhere. Play Jev Bingo. I do silly things like, I do silly things. Or you can spend pages and make me wear silly things like funny ears, like this one. Have a good stream.
I'm eating my lunch, a slice of cheese. And you're just going to have to ignore that. There's nothing I can do about it. Because I'm not going to start playing around with the green screen right now. So, how are you? What have you been up to? I do have a drink here. I didn't have enough time to jury-rig a not sponsored cover for it because it's one of the skinny cans. So I thought, oh, that's silly. I can just pour it into a glass. I just hope I don't tip it over. Sorry, weird way of talking, but it was cold and I also didn't want it to drip off my lip. It's not bad actually. Black currant. Now, if you live in North America, you probably don't have black currants because gooseberries and something or other rust. It's a disease that plants can get, and apparently gooseberries and their related fruits, black currants and red currants and white currants, can carry it, and it was a major threat to some American crop, but I'm not sure which, so they just banned them. So if you want to try black currants, you have to go somewhere else. Yeah, that's it. That's the way it is. Which is why a lot of people don't know what gooseberries are. And why I'm a little surprised they're feeding red currants to the geese in Disney Dreamlight Valley when they could be feeding them gooseberries, because it's gooseberries is what they're called. Anyway, so none of that. We don't need that. We only have one word today, and that is shame, because we are reading a really old book, so there's probably going to be lots of opportunities to drink from the shame bottle today. Drink deep of the shame bottle. Right. So we have a new book today. This very uninteresting cover over here is, I don't know how old, I don't know what edition it's from, but it's one of the older hardback versions, so therefore it's up on our screen. And it's called The Cuckoo Clock, and it's by Mrs. Molesworth.
but it was published in 1877, so do expect it to be a little bit didactic, you know, trying to teach the kids something rather than letting them figure it out for themselves. That's just the way those older books were. Okay? So here we go. We haven't had one from her for a while. She did Carrots, Just a Little Boy. He did Learn from the Situations he was in, that sort of stuff. Now, the version I have on my iPad mini doesn't have illustrations in it, but the one on Wikisource does. I don't like doing it with the book on screen as well as everything else on screen when I'm reading, just because there's too many things that I'm juggling. I prefer to actually have it on a separate book, which is why I don't have it on screen for you guys. I mean, you can look the book up and download it for yourself. Go to gutenberg.org and then search for the title or the author's name and you'll find the book, and then you can download it and read along with me, or you can read it in your browser. Okay, so you can do that. I don't mind. Probably best not to spoil the story and get ahead, but it's probably also not a crucial story where getting ahead is going to be an issue. Something else about the book, illustrations. So I do have the illustrations available to put up here, but I'm going to have to just sort of keep an eye on what the text is saying and hope I remember when to put those illustrations in, because usually when I have illustrations, they're also in the book, that in the copy of the book that I'm reading, the particular version I have on my device, so I know when to show them to you. And even sometimes, because I know the way the text is running and I know that they've got the illustration not quite where it happens in the text, I will actually say, no, we're not doing that now. We're going to be doing that in a couple of minutes, a couple of pages time, just because that's the way the story goes. So let's ignore all that and carry on, and we'll see if we can get somewhere with this. I was looking for an illustration of Victorian houses in like a Victorian square, because the frontispiece of the book... What on earth is that? No, that's from another book. Thank you very much. With illustrations in colour by Maria L. Kirk. Well, it didn't show me any when I was looking at it before, so maybe the illustrations I've got are different to the ones that I've got, if you know what I mean. Yeah, it's not showing me the sort of illustrations I was... I hate that. You look at the book online, which you think is the same copy that you've downloaded to your iPad, and it doesn't show you any illustrations except for that weird blocky colour cover, which they do over on Project Gutenberg. And then you open the book up and you start reading it, and it's got a whole other set of illustrations which are nothing like the ones that you found over on Wikipedia. So maybe I'll sort that out next time. We'll see. So it's a really old house. It's on a little square. The illustration that I found is on a little square. It's not one of the ones I can show you, because it's a whole other set of proportions, and it meant that I was going to have to rearrange where pictures were, and it was too annoying. So therefore, because it's too annoying, you don't get it. But you get this lovely picture of the Victoria Embankment in London around that same time. These are big grand houses because they're all along the riverfront. I don't know London well enough to be able to tell you which ones these are, nor even which bridge this is, but I do know people who could tell you that. Some of these things will still be there and other ones have gone, long gone. But it was the same sort of era. So the style of the house that you see here, with the big blocky front and then the ornate stonework along the top, and then it's got little sections of it which poke out and stuff like that. It's a little bit more recent than that, the one that they use in the illustration, which is actually when the book is set. So it's a block-shaped house, so it doesn't have a pointy roof or anything like that. So don't bother looking up Victorian houses on Google, because it's going to show you American Victorian houses which have those turrets in the corners with pointy roofs. Victoria was not their queen. Why? This is why I've asked before, what do Americans call that era? Because Victoria was not part of their world. I mean, yeah, they were trading and talking to England, but they were not part of England anymore. They were not part of the empire, let alone the Commonwealth, which is what it's now called. So why call it Victorian? Because it's about the rule of Queen Victoria. Sorry, getting distracted. So yeah, you can look for them, but don't bother looking for the ones that have the rounded ends and the turrety bits and the pointy roof and stuff. It's not that sort of house at all. In London, you had a whole lot of houses that were reasonably close together, and you'd have a street, and then you have a little side street off it, which would have a little mini square at the end, and it would have a cluster of houses around it, and they would be the blocky shaped houses, that style of house where it just comes up like this. It's got, from the street, it looks like it's got a flat roof, and often will have a porch that's just poked out a little bit further, very square looking and all that sort of stuff, those quite tall rectangular windows. So it's that sort of thing, and it's got a picture of a carriage out the front with a horse. So there you go. That's what I was going to show you. And instead you got the Victorian embankment, because I couldn't find any, because Google wants me to look at American Victorian houses. So there you go. And chapter 1, the old house. We're off to a good start, aren't we? Not. Somewhat back from the village street stands the old-fashioned country seat. And there's your epigram for today. Epigram? Epigraph. I can't remember which one it is. Epigraph, I think it is. Once upon a time, in an old town in an old street, there stood a very old house. There you go. Such a house as you could hardly find nowadays, however you search, for it belonged to a gone-by time, a time now quite passed away, even though she's writing in the Victorian era. The sort of house that I was looking at was definitely early Victorian, or whatever the period was just before it. Yeah, this sort of era. It stood in a street, but yet it was not like a townhouse, for though the front opened right onto the pavement, the back windows looked out upon a beautiful, quaintly terraced garden, so it's quite old-fashioned, with old trees growing so thick and close together that in summer it was like living on the edge of a forest to be near them. This sounds like a wonderful place to be. A little bit like some houses where in London where they back onto the parks. Especially if it's not a very busy park. This sounds really good. I like it. So it was like living in summer, it was like living on the edge of a forest to be near them. And even in winter, the web of their interlaced branches hid all clear view behind, because deciduous trees, so you're still going to get all the branches. Don't have them in New Zealand as much, so therefore it's like, it stands out to me in a description. There was a colony of rooks in this old garden. Now, rooks are a type of bird. They are a corvid. They're related to crows, and what's the other one? A crow in a crowd is a rook alone is a crow. That's how I was told it. So you get a rookery. A rookery is where you will have a colony of rooks living together. What's the other one? Jackdaw. A jackdaw is another one, or another name for one of them. I don't know. Can't remember. They're black and they've got a fairly strong-looking beak. Not a thin, pointy beak, but a strong, tapered beak. There was a colony of rooks in this old garden. Year after year, they held their parliaments. A parliament of rooks. That's what the collective noun is, I think. They held their parliaments and cawed and chattered and fussed. Year after year, they built their nests and hatched their eggs. Year after year, I suppose, the old ones gradually died off and the young ones took their place, though but for knowing this must be so, no one would have suspected it, for to all appearance, the rooks were always the same, ever and always the same. Time indeed seemed to stand still in and all about the old house, as if it and the people who inhabited it had got so old that they could not get any older and had outlived the possibility of change. So this is the impression you get of this house and the household. But one day at last there did come a change. Late in the dusk of an autumn afternoon, a carriage drove up to the door of the old house, came rattling over the stones, because they're cobbled, like little squares of stone all set down to make your road. came rattling over the stones with a sudden noisy clatter that sounded quite impertinent, startling the rooks just as they were composing themselves to rest, and setting them all wondering what could be the matter. A little girl was the matter. A little girl in a grey merino frock and a grey beaver bonnet, grey tippet and grey gloves, all grey together, even to her eyes, all except her round rosy face and bright brown hair. Her name even was rather grey, for it was Griselda. There you go. So merino frock. So merino is a type of sheep's wool. It's very fine. It's softer than a lot of other wools. And so therefore it would be one that is used as a very comfortable but also elegant fabric, because the thinner the fibres of it, the cleaner, the tidier the weaving that you can do with it. Beaver bonnet, so made out of beaver skin, so it's a fur hat. Grey tippet, that would be like a mini shawl sort of thing. It sits around your neck. It's often done out of fur, but it's to keep you warm, and you wear it as an extra collar. And grey gloves. You know what gloves are. I don't need to explain that, do I? Really? Okay. They are like socks, but you wear them on your hands. And mittens are the ones where it looks like a big round bit and a bit poking out the side. And gloves have each finger as a separate little tube. Those are gloves. They are for keeping your hands warm in this context. And also, when you would go out, you wore gloves, because that was what you did. Right, we'll carry on. Next time, ask politely about a word, okay? A gentleman lifted her out of the carriage and disappeared with her into the house, and later that same evening the gentleman came out of the house and got into the carriage, which had come back for him again, and drove away. That was all that the rooks saw of the change that had come to the old house. Shall we go inside and see more? Up the shallow, wide, old-fashioned staircase, past the wainscoted walls, that's where you have timber at the bottom, up to a certain level, or timber all the way up, as opposed to wallpaper. Wainscoting is often the timber finish on a wall, and sometimes it means it comes up to a certain height, and then above that is painted or has wallpaper or something. And sometimes it means it goes all the way to the top, depending on the era. So let's ignore that. The wainscoted walls, dark and shining like a mirror, so they definitely would. Down a long, narrow passage with many doors, but for their gleaming brass handles, one would not have known were there. So the wooden walls and the wooden doors just sort of all blend in together. The oldest of the three old servants led little Griselda, so tired and sleepy that her supper had been left almost untasted, to the room prepared for her. It was a queer room, for everything in the house was queer. And yes, I know what the word means these days, but we are going to read it as it's written, which just means odd or unusual back in that era. Okay? This is where the word came from, this sort of era and usage. So we're going to respect the word. But the dancing light of the fire burned brightly in the tiled grate. It looked cheerful enough. "I'm glad there's a fire," said the child. "Will it keep alight till the morning, do you think?" The old servant shook her head. "'Twould not be safe to leave it so that it would burn till morning," she said. "When you are in bed and asleep, little missy, you won't want the fire. Bed's the warmest place, 'cause you've got blankets. And you may even have had the bed warmed by a bed warmer, a warming pan, or a hot water bottle. Not the nice soft flexible ones we have now. They used to have ceramic ones, and they'd put hot water in them and have a bung at one end so that the water didn't come out, or on top. Not the cuddly ones that we have now. "It isn't for that I want it," said Griselda, being warm. "It's for the light I like it. This house all looks so dark to me, and yet there seem to be lights hidden in the walls too. They shine so." The old servant smiled. "It will all seem strange to you, no doubt," she said, "but you'll get to like it, missy. 'Tis a good old house, and those that know best love it well." "Whom do you mean?" asked Griselda. "Do you mean my great aunts?" "Ah, yes, and others besides." replied the old woman. "The rooks love it well, and others beside. Did you ever hear tell of the good people, missy, over the sea where you come from?" Oh, is this a little bit like The Secret Garden, where the girl gets sent home from India because her parents died? "Fairies, do you mean?" cried Griselda, her eyes sparkling. "Of course I've heard of them, but I never saw any. Did you?" "I wouldn't say," answered the old woman. "I'm not saying yes and I'm not saying no. My mind is not young like yours, missy, and there are times when strange memories come back to me as of sights and sounds in a dream. I am too old to see and hear as I once could. We are all old here, missy. 'Twas time something young came to the old house again." "How strange and queer everything seems," thought Griselda as she climbed into bed. "I don't feel as if I belonged to it a bit, and they're all so old. Perhaps they won't like having a child among them." The very same thought had occurred to the rooks. They could not decide as to the fors and againsts at all. So they settled to put it to the vote the next morning, and in the meantime they and Griselda all went to sleep. I never heard if they slept well that night. After such unusual excitement, it was hardly to be expected they would, but Griselda, being a little girl and not a rook, was so tired that 2 minutes after she had tucked herself up in bed, she was quite sound asleep and did not wake for several hours. Which sounds like she woke in the middle of the night. Let's find out. "I wonder what it will all look like in the morning," was her last waking thought. "If it was summer now, or spring, I shouldn't mind. There would always be something nice to do then." As sometimes happens, when she woke again, very early in the morning, long before it was light, her thoughts went straight on with the same subject. Have you had that happen? I have. It's like you're in the middle of a conversation and you fall asleep mid-sentence, and then when you wake up again, you just carry on as if the break didn't happen. And sometimes your mind does that with thoughts. Sometimes it doesn't. "If it was summer now or spring," she repeated to herself, just as if she had not been asleep at all, like the man who fell into a trance for 100 years, just as he was saying, "It is bit," and when he woke up again, finished the sentence as if nothing had happened. "Early cold." "If only it was spring," thought Griselda. "And I'm thinking that we're meant to know who this dude was that thought it was bitterly cold and fell asleep halfway through the sentence, but I don't know. Was that Rumpelstiltskin? No, not Rumpelstiltskin. Who's the other guy who fell? The guy who fell asleep. I can't remember. Was it him? I don't know. Just as she had got so far in her thoughts, she gave a great start. What was it she heard? Could her wish have come true? Was this fairyland indeed that she had got to, where one only needs to wish for it to be? She rubbed her eyes, but it was too dark to see. That was not very fairyland-like. But her ears, she felt certain, had not deceived her. She was quite sure that she had heard the cuckoo. And if you wonder what a cuckoo sounds like, we've got them in Disney Dreamlight Valley Wish Blossom Ranch. Yes, we do, in one part of the map. She listened with all her might, but she did not hear it again. Could it, after all, have been been fancy? Her imagination. She grew sleepy at last and was just dropping off when, yes, there it was again, as clear and distinct as possible. Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. 3, 4, 5 times. Then perfect silence, as before. You and I know what it was, don't we? What a funny cuckoo, said Griselda to herself. I could almost fancy it was in the house. I wonder if my great-aunts have a tame cuckoo in a cage. I don't think I ever heard of such a thing. But this is such a queer house. Everything seems different in it. Perhaps they have a tame cuckoo. I'll ask them in the morning. It's very nice to hear, whatever it is. And with a pleasant feeling of companionship, a sense that she was not the only living creature awake in this dark world, Griselda lay listening contentedly enough for the sweet, fresh notes of the cuckoo's friendly greeting. But before it sounded again through the silent house, she was once more fast asleep. And this time she slept till daylight had found its way into all but the very darkest nooks and crannies of the ancient dwelling. She dressed herself carefully, for she had been warned that her aunts loved neatness and precision. She fastened each button of her grey frock and tied down her hair as smooth as such a brown tangle could be tied down, and absorbed with these weighty cares, she forgot all about the cuckoo for the time. It was not until she was sitting at breakfast with her aunts that she remembered it, or rather was reminded of it, by some little remark that was made about the friendly robins on the terrace walk outside. The terrace walk may be the footpath out in front of the house. I'm not sure. Sorry, itchy nose. "Oh, Aunt," she exclaimed, stopping short halfway, the journey to her mouth of a spoonful of bread and milk. Sentence structure in the old days is weird. "Have you got a cuckoo in a cage?" "A cuckoo in a cage?" repeated her elder aunt, Miss Grizzle, Grizzel. "What is the child talking about?" "In a cage?" echoed Miss Tabitha, the other old aunt. "A cuckoo in a cage?" "There's a cuckoo somewhere in the house," said Griselda. "I heard it in the night. It couldn't have been out of doors, could it? It would be too cold." The aunts looked at each other with a little smile. "So like her grandmother," they whispered. Then Miss Grizzle said, "We have a cuckoo, my dear, though it isn't in a cage, and it isn't exactly the sort of cuckoo you are thinking of. It lives in a clock." "In a clock," repeated Miss Tabitha, as if to confirm her sister's statement. I'm glad I chose the voices that way round. "In a clock?" exclaimed Griselda, opening her grey eyes very wide. It sounded something like the three bears, all speaking one after the other, only Griselda's voice was not like Tiny's. It was the loudest of the three. "In a clock?" she exclaimed. "But it can't be alive then." "Why not?" said Miss Grizzle. "I don't know," replied Griselda, looking puzzled. "I knew a little girl once," continued Miss Grizzle, "who was quite of opinion the cuckoo was alive, and nothing would have persuaded her it was not. Finish your breakfast, my dear, and then, if you like, you shall come with me and see the cuckoo for yourself." "Thank you, Aunt Grizzle," said Griselda, going on with her bread and milk. "Yes," said Miss Tabitha, "you shall see the cuckoo for yourself." "Thank you, Aunt Tabitha," said Griselda. It was rather a bother to have to always say thank you or no thank you twice, because you've got to say it to both of the aunts. But Griselda thought it was polite to do so, as Aunt Tabitha always repeated everything that Aunt Grizzle said. It wouldn't have... I wonder if her name is also Griselda. It sounds like it, doesn't it? It wouldn't have mattered so much if Aunt Tabitha had said it at once after Miss Grizzle, but she generally made a little pause between. It was sometimes rather awkward. But of course it was better to say thank you or no thank you twice over than to hurt Aunt Tabitha's feelings. After breakfast, Aunt Grizzle was as good as her word. She took Griselda through several of the rooms in the house, pointing out all the curiosities and telling all the histories of the rooms and their contents, and Griselda liked to listen. Only in every room they came to, she wondered when they would get to the room where lived the cuckoo. Aunt Tabitha did not come with them, for she was rather rheumatic. She had aches and pains, probably in her joints, possibly arthritis. People used to talk about having the rheumatics, and it was often those sort of age aches as you got older. On the whole, Griselda was not sorry. It would have taken such a very long time, you see, to have all the histories twice over, and possibly, if Griselda had got tired, she might have forgotten about the thank yous or no thank yous twice over. Oh dear. The old house looked quite as queer and quaint by daylight as it had seemed the evening before, almost more so indeed, for the view from the windows added to the sweet, odd, old-fashionedness of everything. "We have beautiful roses in summer," observed Miss Grizzle, catching sight of the direction in which the child's eyes were wandering. I wish it was summer. I do love summer, said Griselda, but there is a very rosy scent in the rooms even now, Aunt Grizzle, though it is winter or nearly winter. Miss Grizzle looked pleased. My potpourri, she explained, which is a mixture of dried flowers and these days essential oils, but in the old days it was just dried flowers and various other botanical items, dried up and stored together in pots so that the smell would waft out. Sometimes they were done where they weren't dry, they were left. They were not ones that you looked at, they were ones you just smelled, and they have a stronger smell, where you leave them so they're half moist, but they're usually mixed through with, I think it's salt, so that they don't go rotten, but because they're that little bit fresher, because they're not dry, they actually have more fragrance that comes from them. It used to be quite an art, actually making up your own potpourri, and also written as potpourri. Pourri, but I've always pronounced it potpourri. That's just the way I was told it was said, so you can call it what you want, but that's what I'm reading. They were just then standing in what she called the great saloon, a handsome old room furnished with gold and white chairs that must once have been brilliant, and faded yellow damask hangings. Damask is a type of fabric with a pattern woven into it. A feeling of awe had crept over Griselda as they entered this ancient drawing room. What grand parties there must have been in it long ago. But as for dancing in it now, dancing or laughing or chattering, such a thing was quite impossible to imagine, because the house and its contents, and including the people, are so old. Miss Grizzle crossed the room to where stood in one corner a marvellous Chinese cabinet, all black and gold and carving. It was made in the shape of a temple or a palace. Griselda was not sure which. Anyway, it was very delicious and wonderful. At the door stood, one on each side, two solemn mandarins, or, to speak more correctly, perhaps I should say, a mandarin and his wife, for the right-hand figure was evidently intended to be a lady. Now, a mandarin in this context, I think, is a Chinese person of some standing. One of the spoken languages of China is Mandarin. The other main one is Cantonese. Cantonese is from the southwest more. Mandarin is more from the northeast and is more associated with the ruling classes. So I think the naming has come from a class of person within China at the time. And I would expect we're going to get a little bit of racial description that is not accurate or acceptable these days, but we're just going to read it as observed at the time. Miss Grizzle gently touched their heads. Forthwith, to Griselda's astonishment, they began solemnly to nod. Do you remember those little wee ornaments which had nodding heads? These must have been a more elegant version. "Oh, how do you make them do that, Aunt Grizzle?" she exclaimed. "Never you mind, my dear. It wouldn't do for you to try to make them nod. They wouldn't like it," replied Miss Grizzle mysteriously. Respect to your elders, my dear. Always remember that. The mandarins are many years older than you, older than I myself, in fact." Griselda wondered, if this were so, how it was that Miss Grizzle took such liberties with them herself, but she said nothing. "Here is my last summer's potpourri," continued Miss Grizzle, touching a great china jar on a little stand close beside the cabinet. "You may smell it, my dear." Nothing loath, Griselda buried her round little nose in the fragrant leaves. "It's lovely," she said. "May I smell it whenever I like, Aunt Grizzle?" "We shall see," replied her aunt. "It isn't every little girl, you know, that we would trust to come into the great saloon alone. There's probably all sorts of things that can be broken too easily, precious things." "No," said Griselda meekly. At least she asked, and heard a response. Miss Grizzle led the way to a door opposite to that by which they had entered. She opened it and passed through, Griselda following, into a small anteroom, side room. "It is on the stroke of 10, said Miss Grizzle, consulting her watch. "Now, my dear, you shall make your acquaintance with our Cuckoo." The cuckoo that lived in a clock. Griselda, that's what the story tells us, not what the lady says. Griselda gazed round her eagerly. Where was the clock? She could see nothing in the least like one, only up on the wall in one corner was what looked like a miniature house of very dark brown carved wood. It was not so very like a house, but it certainly had a roof with deep projecting eaves, and on looking closer, yes, it was a clock. After all, only the figures, which had once been gilt, had grown dim with age, like everything else, and the hands at a little distance were hardly to be distinguished from the face. Miss Grizzle stood perfectly still, looking up at the clock, Griselda beside her, in breathless expectation. Presently there came a sort of distant rumbling. Something was going to happen. Suddenly 2 little doors above the clock face, which Griselda had not known were there, sprang open with a burst, and out flew a cuckoo, flapped his wings and uttered his pretty cry, "Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo." Miss Grizzle counted aloud, 7, 8, 9, 10. "Yes, he never makes a mistake," she added triumphantly. "All these long years I have never known him wrong. There are no such clocks made nowadays, I can assure you, my dear." "But is it a clock? Isn't he alive?" exclaimed Griselda. "He looked at me and nodded his head before he flapped his wings and went into his house again. He did indeed, Aunt," she said earnestly, "just like saying 'How do you do' to me." Again Miss Grizzle smiled, the same odd yet pleased smile that Griselda had seen on her face at breakfast. "Just what Sibylla used to say," she murmured. "Well, my dear," she added aloud, "it is quite right he should say 'How do you do' to you. It is the first time he has seen you, though many a year ago he knew your dear grandmother, and your father too. When he was a little boy, you will find him a good friend, and one that can teach you many lessons." "What, Aunt Grizzle?" inquired Griselda, looking puzzled. "Punctuality, for one thing, and faithful discharge of duty," replied Miss Grizzle. "Today I'm come to see the cuckoo, to watch for him coming out sometimes." "May I come to see the cuckoo, to watch for him coming out sometimes?" asked Griselda, who felt as if she could spend all day looking up at the clock, watching for her little friend's appearance. "You will see him several times a day," said her aunt, "for it is in this little room I intend you to prepare your tasks. It is nice and quiet, and nothing to disturb you, and close to the room where your Aunt Tabitha and I usually sit." So saying, Miss Grizzle opened a second door in the little anteroom, and to Griselda's surprise, at the foot of a short flight of stairs, through another door, half open, she caught sight of her Aunt Tabitha knitting quietly beside the fire in the room in which they had breakfasted. So she's been taken out of the breakfast room and around through other rooms and into this little anteroom, which then goes up a couple of steps across and then down into where they had breakfast. "What a very funny house it is, Aunt Grizzle," she said, as she followed her aunt down the steps. "Every room has so many doors, and you come back to where you were just when you think you are so far off. I shall never be able to find my way about." "Oh, yes, you will, my dear, very soon," said her aunt encouragingly. "She is very kind," thought Griselda, "but I wish she wouldn't call my lessons tasks. It makes them sound so dreadfully hard. But anyway, I'm glad I'm to do them here in the room where that dear Cuckoo lives." And that's the end of the chapter. 41 pages. Oh my goodness, that was. So, time for a drink. So far we haven't had to drink from the shame bottle. Yay. I'm dropping condensation drips down my front. Chapter 2. Impatient Griselda. I really wish I knew when these illustrations were meant to be shown to you. I can show you one of them because it's the frontispiece of the story. Let's find the illustrations. They're here somewhere. I put them here. I know they are. Not illustrations DDV, this one. Here. So this is the frontispiece. I have no idea what this relates to because I haven't read this part yet. And then we have the first main illustration. I don't think we've got to this part of the story yet because she looks like she's in her nightgown. And there's the cuckoo clock. So we will put that away again for now because we're going to get to it. Chapter 2. I turned off the wrong picture. Let's turn off the right picture. It suddenly went black around me. Oh no, I'm in a black hole. Let's carry on. Chapter 2, Impatient Griselda. Let's have a look in the table of contents too to see it gives me names and numbers. Yay! I'm so pleased about that. Epigram, whatever. The poemy bit at the beginning of the chapter. Fairies but seldom appear. If we do wrong, we must expect that it will cost us dear. Oh, we have a redemption of the Rotunda of Whiffle. Thank you so much for redeeming that, Starmancer Shrew. And welcome. Good to see you. So what have we got? We have Mini Bow. I think it's probably still set up on the Disney ones. I do have it here, I know, because I had them set up the other day. Mini Bow. Yeah. Sorry, try and get the fluffy bits of my hair out of the way. And we shall get the egg timer running. So good to see you. I hope you're doing well and having fun, and that the weather isn't too harsh for you. For anyone else who's wondering, oh, did I turn captions on? No, I didn't. I forgot to turn them back on again. Thank you for reminding me. I had them turned off because of the video. So if you're listening without sound, like it's late at night and stuff, it does help if the captions are on. If people who are not used to captions come along, we have the captions on because some people are watching, not actually listening for various reasons. Sometimes it's because too many words all the time that they're hearing are overstimulating. For some people, like me, seeing the words as well as hearing them means that the words I hear are processed more quickly and better. If you have someone in your life who you say something to them and they say pardon or what, or get you to repeat it, and then halfway through you repeating it, they answer whatever the question was you were asking, it's usually not that they didn't hear you, and don't bother telling them off for it. It's not actually their fault. It's a brain processing thing where they need time to take the sounds they heard and interpret them inside their head for them to make sense. It's also why some people, like me, if I'm with people and they're talking, I will watch their mouths. I'm not technically lip reading because I can't, but me seeing the words, the shape of their mouth as the words come out, helps me to perceive the sounds I'm hearing better and process them a lot faster so that I can actually respond in a reasonable amount of time instead of going like, what was it they were saying? How did those words go? It's like this. And it's not a conscious thing. It just happens. It's just the way the brain works. I'm doing okay, but sore from a hard workout. Oh, well done on the workout, but oh, I hope that eases soon. And I hope it's nice and worthwhile for you too. So there you go. Thank you for reminding me about the captions. So yeah, if you're not used to captions, we have captions and they are hard-coded. You can't turn them off. Also, if you're on Twitch and you usually have captions turned on other people's streams, they're what they call open subtitles, open captions, where you get to choose if you turn them on or off, and you're finding it a little overwhelming because you've got the normal Twitch ones as well as mine on, just turn them off when you're on my streams. And then you'll just get the one set of captions showing. If they are your own, you can also adjust the transparency of the background so that it can, if they're sitting down here, it will blank out where my bit is. So if you want to, you can, that's fine. I do know that even if my videos go up on YouTube, that you will also still see these same captions because they're part of the video. They're saved as part of the video. So here we go. Impatient Griselda, yes, captions, good stuff. It was all very well for a few days. Griselda found plenty to amuse herself with while the novelty lasted. Enough to we still don't know why she's here. Something about coming from another country, and that's it. Enough to prevent her missing very badly the home she had left over the sea and the troop of noisy, merry brothers who teased and petted her. Ooh. Of course, she missed them, but not dreadfully. She was neither homesick nor dull. It was not quite such smooth sailing when lessons began. She did not dislike lessons. In fact, she'd always thought she was rather fond of them. But the having to do them alone was not lively, and her teachers were very strict. The worst of all was the writing and arithmetic master, a funny little old man who wore knee breeches and took snuff and called her aunt Madame, bowing formally whenever he addressed her. He screwed Griselda up into such an unnatural attitude to write her copies, had her sitting a certain way, and it was not a normal way for her to sit, that she really felt as if she would never come straight and loose again, and the arithmetic part of his instructions was even worse. Oh, what sums in addition he gave her. Griselda had never been partial to sums, and her rather easy-going governess at home had not, to tell the truth, been very partial to them either. And Mr. I can't remember the little old gentleman's name. Suppose we should call him Mr. Knee Breeches. That means trousers that finish just below the knee and then are fastened firmly around below the knee. And snuff is like powdered tobacco with sometimes with other things mixed in with it, and to take snuff is you take a pinch of it and you sniff it, and it was a done thing. And people would have ornamental snuff boxes and all sorts of things. Sometimes you'd put the snuff on the back of your hand and you'd sniff it that way. Wasn't necessarily like standard modern drug taking, but it was, I suppose, in some ways a precursor to that. But it was considered fashionable in certain eras. Probably not so much the era that they are currently living in, but from before then, because everything seems to be extra old in this house, including the tutor, I think. Goody, he says that Star Matsushu is a celestial red panda. Inedible, he says. That sounds awful. I'm guessing you're talking about the snuff, not the celestial red panda. Oh, and it's really warm here, and I've got the skylights open, and it's only the start of summer. Oh dear, so hot. Goriki, hi Goriki. Yeah, the stuff. Yeah, definitely. Right. Oh. Egg timer. We'll turn that off, and we'll take off the mini bow. I will get another selection, a different selection of ornamental headwear to wear for wheels at some stage. It'll just be a different mix of the other ones that we've already got. So don't panic about that. They will happen. But just at the moment, I'm not going to go changing it halfway through. So, I can't remember the little old gentleman's name. Suppose we call him Mr. Knee Breeches. Mr. Knee Breeches, when he found this out, conscientiously put her back to the very beginning, when he found out that her governess was not partial to maths. And yes, we use the plural in English. So that's what I'm using in the story and when I speak it. It was dreadful, really. He came twice a week, and the days he didn't come were as bad as those he did, for he left her a whole row. I was going to say, but you couldn't call Mr. Knee Breeches additions rows. They were far too fat and wide across to be spoken of. Whole slatefuls of these terrible mountains of figures to climb wearily to the top of, and not to climb once up merely. The terrible thing was that Mr. Knee Breeches' favourite method of what he called proving was the It was not a partial sentence, it was meant to be a full sentence, so we shall read it again. The terrible thing was Mr. Kneebreech's favourite method of what he called proving. I can't explain it. It's far beyond my poor powers, but it has something to do with cutting off the top line after you had added it all up and had actually done the sum, you understand, cutting off the top line and adding the long rows up again without it and then joining it on again somewhere else. I know what she's talking about, do you? So, I hadn't actually thought of it as being called proving. Self-checking your sums. So you have a top row that you're working with, and then you have the other ones that you're, in this situation, adding to it, and then you have your answer at the bottom. So what she's talking about is you take that top row off, you add these two together, or you subtract them. I don't know which way round it's meant to be. And the answer at the other end is meant to be the same as the original one, if that's what she's talking about. And you've just proven that you've done it correctly if they're the same. I wouldn't mind so much, said poor Griselda one day, if it was any good. But you see, Aunt Grizzle, it isn't, for I'm just as likely to do the proving wrong as the sum itself. More likely, for I'm always so tired when I get to the proving, and so all that's proved is that something's wrong, and I'm sure that isn't any good except to make me cross. The reality is, you keep working with them enough, and you get more and more familiar, and you make less and less mistakes. You can understand a concept, but to learn the concept, you have to keep going over it. That's just the way it is. That's the way your brain works. To learn the patterns, to learn how something works. But it's, for a child, it's unpleasant because it's boring or hard. Hush, said her aunt gravely. That is not the way for a little girl to speak. Improve these golden hours of youth, Griselda. They will never return. She's speaking from experience. I hope not, muttered Griselda, if it means doing sums. Miss Grizzle, fortunately, was a little deaf. How convenient. I wonder if sometimes she chooses. She did not hear this remark. Just then the cuckoo clock struck 11. Good little Cuckoo, said Miss Grizzle. What an example he sets you. His life is spent in the faithful discharge of duty. And so saying, she left the room. The cuckoo was still telling the hour. 11 took a good while. It seemed to Griselda that the bird repeated her aunt's last words. Faithful discharge of your duty, he said. Faithful, Cuckoo. You horrid little creature, exclaimed Griselda in a passion. What business have you to mock me? She seized a book, the first that came to hand, and flung it at the bird who was just beginning his 11th cuckoo. Is she going to break it? He disappeared with a snap, disappeared without flapping his wings, or as Griselda had always fancied he did, giving her a friendly nod, and in an instant all was silent. Griselda felt a little frightened. What had she done? She looked up at the clock. It seemed just the same as usual. The cuckoo's doors closely shut, no sign of any disturbance. Could it have been her fancy only that he had sprung back more hastily than he would have done, but for her throwing the book at him? She began to hope so and tried to go on with her lessons, but it was no use, though she really gave her best attention to the long addition sums and found that by doing so she managed them much better than before. She could not feel happy or at ease. Every few minutes she glanced up at the clock as if expecting the cuckoo to come out, though she knew quite well there was no chance of his doing so till 12 o'clock, as it was only the hours, not the half-hours and quarters, that he told. I wish it was 12 o'clock, she said to herself anxiously, more than once. If only the clock had not been so very high up on the wall, she would have been tempted to climb up and open the little doors and peep in, to satisfy herself as to the cuckoo's condition. That actually would not be a good idea. You often break them when you do that. Yes. Cuckoo clocks were around when I was a kid. Even though the story says there are none like this anymore, they go in and out of fashion. So yes, they're more modern versions of them, I remember. But there was no possibility of this. Checking on the cuckoo's condition, the clock was far, very far above her reach, and there was no high piece of furniture standing near upon which she could have climbed to get to it. There was nothing to be done but to wait for 12 o'clock. And after all, she did not wait for 12 o'clock, for just about 11:30 Miss Grizzle's voice was heard calling to her to put on her hat and cloak quickly and come out to walk up and down the terrace with her. "It is fine just now," said Miss Grizzle, "but there is a prospect of rain before long. You must leave your lessons for the present and finish them in the afternoon." "I have finished them," said Griselda meekly. "All?" inquired her aunt. "Yes, all," replied Griselda. "Ah, well, then this afternoon, if the rain holds off, we shall drive to Merrybrow Hill and inquire for the health of your dear godmother, Lady Lavender," said Miss Grizzle. Starmancer Shoe says, "I have a cuckoo clock based on My Neighbour Totoro, and it plays the theme song. I love it." Oh, that would be so sweet. Oh, that would be so sweet. I remember when I first watched... Is it that one? Is that the one that has the little dust mites? I think it is. The little white ones that bounce along and then go invisible. I remember when I first saw those, wanting them to be able to go bouncing across my screen and then go invisible. But it's highly copyright, so I can't. Poor Griselda, there were few things she disliked more than a drive with her aunts. Oh dear, it would have been better to be slow on the schoolwork. They went in the old yellow chariot with all the windows up. So a chariot in our minds is what the Romans drove, and it was open and it was kind of like round shaped at the front, and the people stand up in them and crack the whips, or Julius Caesar waves or whatever, they're in the Asterix comics and things like that. But in this context, it became a name for a horse-drawn conveyance, possibly a particular style, but not what we think of as the Roman-style chariot. So we won't worry about what it is. We just know it's a horse-drawn vehicle, because that's what they had back then. They went in the old yellow chariot with all the windows up, and of course, because to open the windows you slide them down, and then to close them you slide them up, so all the windows up. And of course Griselda had to sit with her back to the horses, which made her very uncomfortable when she had no air and had to sit still for so long. A feeling of getting car sick, except it wasn't called that then. Merrybrow Hall was a large house, quite as old and much grander, but not nearly so wonderful as the home of Griselda's aunts. It was 6 miles off, and it took a very long time indeed to drive there in the rumbling old chariot, for the old horses were fat and wheezy, and the old coachman fat and wheezy too. Lady Lavender was, of course, old too, very old indeed, and rather grumpy and very deaf. Miss Grizzle and Miss Tabitha had the greatest respect for her. She always called them "my dear," as if they were quite girls, and they listened to all that she said as if her words were of gold. For some mysterious reason she had been invited to be Griselda's godmother, but as she had never shown her any proof of affection beyond giving her a prayer book and hoping whenever she saw her that she was a good little miss, Griselda did not feel any particular cause for gratitude to her. The drive seemed longer and duller than ever this afternoon, but Griselda bore it meekly, and when Lady Lavender, as usual, expressed her hopes about her, the little girl looked down modestly, feeling her cheeks grow scarlet. "I am not a good little girl at all," she felt inclined to call out. "I'm very bad and cruel. I believe I've killed the dear little Cuckoo," she thought. What would the 3 old ladies have thought if she had called it out? As it was, Lady Lavender patted her approvingly and said she loved to see young people modest and humble-minded. This because she's looking down, eyes downcast. I'm just going to turn that off. I don't need to have that visually on the screen. Modest and humble-minded, and gave her a slice of very highly spiced, rather musty gingerbread, which Griselda couldn't bear. Quite gingery. All the way home, Griselda felt in a fever of impatience to rush up to the anteroom and see if the Cuckoo was all right again. It was late and dark when the chariot at last stopped at the door of the old house. Miss Grizzle got out slowly, and still more slowly Miss Tabitha followed her. Griselda was obliged to restrain herself and move demurely. "It's past your supper time, my dear," said Miss Grizzle. "Go up at once to your room, and Dorcas shall bring some supper to you. Late hours are bad for young people." Griselda obediently wished her aunts good night and went quietly upstairs, but once out of sight at the first landing, she changed her pace. She turned to the left instead of to the right, which led to her own room, and flew rather than ran along the dimly lighted passage, at the end of which a door led into the great saloon. She opened the door. All was quite dark. It was impossible to fly or run across the great saloon. Even in daylight this would have been a difficult matter. Griselda felt her way as best she could, past the Chinese cabinet and the potpourri jar, till she got to the anteroom door. It was open, and now, knowing her way better, she hurried in. But what was the use? All was silent save the tick-tick of the cuckoo clock in the corner. Oh, if only the cuckoo would come out and call the hour as usual, what a weight would be lifted off Griselda's heart. She had no idea what o'clock it was. It might be close to the hour, or it might be just past it. She stood listening for a few minutes, then hearing Miss Grizzle's voice in the distance, she felt that she dared not stay any longer, and turned to feel her way out of the room again. Just as she got to the door, it seemed to her that something softly brushed her cheek, and a very, very faint cuckoo sounded, as it were, in the air close to her. Startled, but not frightened, Griselda stood perfectly still. "Cuckoo," she said softly, but there was no answer. Again the tones of Miss Grizzle's voice, coming upstairs, reached her ear. "I must go," said Griselda, and finding her way across the saloon without, by great good luck, tumbling against any of the many breakable treasures with which it was filled, she flew down the long passage again, reaching her own room just before Dorcas appeared with her supper. Griselda slept badly that night. She was constantly dreaming of the cuckoo, fancying she heard his voice, and then waking with a start to find it was only fancy. She looked pale and heavy-eyed when she came down to breakfast the next morning, because she hasn't slept well. And her aunt Tabitha, who was alone in the room when she entered, began immediately asking her what was the matter. "I'm sure you are going to be ill, child," she said nervously. "Sister Grizzle must give you some medicine. I wonder what would be the best. Tansy tea is an excellent thing when one has taken cold, or—" But the rest of Miss Tabitha's sentence was never heard, for at this moment Miss Grizzle came hurriedly into the room, her cap awry, her shawl disarranged, her face very pale. I hardly think anyone had ever seen her so discomposed before. "Sister Tabitha," she exclaimed, "what can be going to happen? The cuckoo clock has stopped." "The cuckoo clock has stopped?" repeated Miss Tabitha, holding up her hands. "Impossible!" "But it has, or rather I should say, dear me, I am so upset I cannot explain it myself. The cuckoo has stopped. The clock is going on, but the cuckoo has not told the hours, and Dorcas is of opinion that he left off doing so yesterday. What can be going to happen? What shall we do?" "It sounds like it's more than just that the cuckoo's not cuckooing. It sounds like there's some other connection here with the house or the people." "What can we do?" said Miss Tabitha. "Should we send for the watchmaker?" Miss Grizzle shook her head. "'Twould be worse than useless. Were we to search the world over, we could find no one to put it right. 50 years and more, Tabitha, 50 years and more. It has never missed an hour. We are getting old, Tabitha. Our day is nearly over. Perhaps 'tis to remind us of this." Miss Tabitha did not reply. "It's not really what you're expecting to hear over breakfast, is it? We're going to die soon. Thank you very much. Especially not in this sort of a household." She was weeping silently. The old ladies seemed to have forgotten the presence of their niece, but Griselda could not bear to see their distress. "Yes, that's very dark." She finished her breakfast as quickly as she could and left the room. Now, I seem to remember the era of this book is a little bit... The author wrote in a style that wasn't quite so common at the time. the children were more central to the story rather than it being completely driven by adults, which most of the kids' stories at the time were. Most of the kids' stories at the time were very definitely to teach them something good, how to be good, sort of thing. And this one, this author, there was that in her stories, but there was more story to it, and the children were more important to the story. So the kids who were going to read it or listen to it would be a lot more involved. But also, I feel like the era that she was writing in, there was a little bit less of the mollycoddling of what kids could hear in a story. That did come a little bit later on in the Victorian era. And I'm not absolute about that, but it just feels like that. And we have got a lot more sanitized as we've come through the eras, instead of getting more and more freedom. We have in some ways, but other ways, we mustn't talk about this. We shouldn't touch on that. Where some areas are starting to come back into balance, where it's like, yeah, we talk about it, but we also talk about balance to do with it, things that are unpleasant. So it's a matter of swings and roundabouts. Things change over time. It goes one way and then it goes the other way. That's the swings bit. The old ladies seemed to have forgotten the presence of their niece, but Griselda could not bear to see their distress. She finished her breakfast as quickly as she could and left the room. On her way upstairs, she met Dorcas. "Have you heard what's happened, little missy?" said the old servant. "Yes," replied Griselda. "My ladies are in great trouble," continued Dorcas, who seemed inclined to be more communicative than usual. "And no wonder, for 50 years that clock has never gone wrong." And I have no idea what she was talking like at the beginning of the book. "Can't it be put right?" asked the child. Dorcas shook her head. "No good would come of interfering," she said. "What must be, must be. The luck of the house hangs on that clock. Its maker spent a good part of his life over it, and his last words were that it would bring good luck to the house that owned it, but that trouble would follow its silence. It's my belief," she added solemnly, "that it's a fairy clock. Neither more nor less, for good luck it has brought. There's no denying. There are no cows like ours, missy. Their milk is a proverb hereabouts. There are no hens like ours for laying all the year round. There are no roses like ours, and there's always a friendly feeling in this house, and always has been. 'Tis not a house for wrangling and jangling and sharp words. The good people can't stand that. Nothing drives them away like ill temper or anger." Does sound like a little bit of enchantment somewhere in this story. Good people, the fairy folk. And this is the era where if you had enough money and land around where you were or nearby, you would have your own cow to provide milk for the house, for butter and for cheese, if you weren't buying those items, but you would have fresh milk instead of milk that was going off. And eggs, you'd have fresh eggs because you'd have your own hens. You need eggs not just for things like fried eggs for breakfast or scrambled eggs or anything like that, but also for baking, for cakes. Cakes often need eggs to hold everything together. And if someone is ill, a coddled egg was considered to be an easy form of nutrition to provide them. Coddled egg is like it's mashed up egg, but you cook it so that the whites are cooked and the yolks are partly cooked, and then you smush it all up together. It's initially a slightly odd texture, but it's actually quite yummy. A little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, that sort of thing. So it doesn't have the creamy, slightly soft, foamy texture that scrambled egg has, but it doesn't have the set texture of a standard boiled or a fried egg, or even poached. And they may actually be formed by poaching them without the yolk setting and then mashing them up. Coddled eggs, I don't know. Whatever, you look them up. I'm probably getting them wrong. But eggs were used as a simple source of nutrition for people who were unwell. There you go. Nothing drives them away like ill temper or anger. Griselda's conscience gave her a sharp prick. Could it be her doing that trouble was coming upon the old house? What a punishment for a moment's fit of ill temper. I wish you wouldn't talk that way, Dorcas, she said. Makes me so unhappy. What a feeling heart the child has, said the old servant as she went on her way downstairs. It's true, she's very like Miss Sibylla. That day was a very weary and sad one for Griselda. She was oppressed by a feeling she did not understand. She knew she had done wrong, but she had sorely repented it. And I do think the cuckoo might have come back again, she said to herself, if he is a fairy, and if he isn't, it can't be true what Dorcas says. Her aunts made no allusion to the subject in her presence, and almost seemed to have forgotten that she had known of their distress. They were more grave and silent than usual, but otherwise things went on in their ordinary way. Griselda spent the morning at her tasks in the anteroom, but was thankful to get away from the tick-tick of the clock in the corner and out into the garden. But there, alas, it was just as bad. The rooks seemed to know that something was the matter. They set to work making such a chatter immediately Griselda appeared that she felt inclined to run back into the house again. I'm sure they're talking about me, she said to herself. Perhaps they are fairies too. I'm beginning to think I don't like fairies. She was glad when bedtime came. It was a sort of reproach to her to see her aunts so pale and troubled, and though she tried to persuade herself that she thought them very silly, she could not throw off the uncomfortable feeling. She was so tired when she went to bed, tired in the disagreeable way that comes from a listless, uneasy day, that she fell asleep at once and slept heavily. When she woke, which she did suddenly and with a start, it was still perfectly dark. Like the first morning that she had awakened in the old house, seemed to her that she had not wakened of herself. Something had roused her. Yes, there it was again, a very, very soft, distant cuckoo. Was it distant? She could not tell. Almost she could have fancied it was close to her. If it's that cuckoo come back again, I'll catch him, exclaimed Griselda. She darted out of her bed, felt her way to the door, which was closed, and opening it, let in a rush of moonlight from the unshuttered passage window. In another moment her little bare feet were pattering along the passage at full speed in the direction of the great saloon. For Griselda's childhood among the troop of noisy brothers had taught her one lesson. She was afraid of nothing. Or rather, perhaps I should say, she had never learnt that there was anything to be afraid of. And is there? And that's the end of the chapter. Ooh, that's interesting. Chapter 3, Obeying Orders. Epigram, epigraph, whatever. Verse bit at the beginning of the chapter, which is not from the book, but from somewhere else. Little girl, thou must thy part fulfill. If we're to take kindly to ours, then pull up the weeds with a will, and fairies will cherish the flowers. I don't know. I think that means she's going to find fairies. There was moonlight, though not so much, in the saloon, and the anteroom too, for though the windows, like those in Griselda's bedroom, had the shutters closed, there was a round part at the top, high up, which the shutters did not reach to, and in crept, through these clear, uncovered panes, quite as many moonbeams, you may be sure, as could find their way. Griselda, eager though she was, could not help standing still a moment to admire the effect. No, unfortunately, no illustrations except for this illustrated first letter of the chapter. No, not that one. Come on, where are you? There. I will see if I can find this particular version of it and download the images from it, as well as the ones that I have got that I can share with you from the, what's it called, Wikisource version, done by two different illustrators. And it's lovely sometimes actually having two sets of illustrations from the same book just to sort of see how different people have visualized stuff. But yes, this would be lovely to have some illustrations of. I will show you illustrations when I get to any, if I can. Griselda, eager though she was, could not help standing still a moment to admire the effect. It looks prettier with the light coming in at those holes at the top than even if the shutters were open, she said to herself. How goldy silvery the cabinet looks, and yes, I do declare the mandarins are nodding. Does that mean that one of the aunts has just gone by, or do they do this by themselves? I wonder if it is out of politeness to me, or does Aunt Grizzle come in last thing at night and touch them to make them keep nodding till morning? I suppose they're a sort of policeman to the palace, and I dare say there are all sorts of beautiful things inside. How I should like to see all through it. But at that moment, the faint tick of the cuckoo clock in the next room, reaching her ear, reminded her of the object of this midnight expedition of hers. She hurried into the anteroom. It looked darker than the great saloon, for it had but one window, but through the uncovered space at the top of this window there penetrated some brilliant moonbeams, one of which lighted up brightly the face of the clock with its queer overhanging eaves. I'm guessing the style of it is a Swiss chalet, because that's what a lot of those were, and the early ones are often just carved wood. They didn't have the bright, gaudy colours painted on them. Griselda approached it and stood below, looking up. "Cuckoo," she said softly, very softly. But there was no reply. "Cuckoo," she repeated rather more loudly. "Why won't you speak to me? I know you're there and you're not asleep, for I heard your voice in my own room. Why won't you come out, Cuckoo?" Tick, tick, said the clock, but there was no other reply. Griselda felt ready to cry. Oh, this is where we're meant to have that illustration. The other illustration, the one that I do have. Illustrations. There they are. Let's move them so you can see them. No, not that. Okay, so illustration, books, that. I hadn't clicked onto it. I'd turned it on, but I hadn't clicked on it. Let's put that there, and we will turn off the keywords. And no, that's not turning it off. And the date and time text. There you go. I'll pull it down slightly. There you go. So she's in the room. There's the clock up. Oh, it's still in the wrong place. Let's see if I can put it in front of those things. That would work better. Then you can see the lovely illustrations when we have them. I just have to find where they are on my list. Illustrations. And I just have to put it in front of overlay. There you go. Means that my hand goes behind the picture instead of in front of it. So that's her coming into the room, and you've got up here at the very top there's a little window that's letting the light in. That's the moonbeams are coming down towards the clock and shining on it. So she's in her nightie. Griselda felt ready to cry. "Cuckoo," she said reproachfully, "I didn't think you were so hard-hearted. I have been so unhappy about you, and I was so pleased to hear your voice again, for I thought I had killed you or hurt you very badly, and I didn't mean to hurt you, Cuckoo. I was sorry the moment I had done it, dreadfully sorry. Dear Cuckoo, won't you forgive me?" She probably should have started with apologising. There was a little sound at last, a faint coming sound, and by the moonlight Griselda saw the doors open. So there's two little doors at the front that open like this, right up the very top, just down below the peak of the roof. There was a little sound at last, a faint coming sound, and by the moonlight Griselda saw the doors open, and out flew the cuckoo. He stood still for a moment, looked round him as it were, then gently flapped his wings and uttered his usual note, "Cuckoo." Griselda stood in breathless expectation, but in her delight she could not help very softly clapping her hands. The cuckoo cleared his throat. You've never heard such a funny little noise as he made, and then in a very distinct but yet cuckoo-y voice he spoke. "Oh no!" It's right on the ad break. It's terrible timing. Oh, I'm not going to skip it. For once, I am going to fill in a little time so we can then carry on with the little sweet details of this. Normally, I wouldn't pause. I would carry on reading, but I think for this one, we shall pause slightly. I am actually enjoying her writing more than I thought I would, which is good, because sometimes they just get so preachy and this is how children ought to behave, so I'm going to write in this way because children ought to learn from this, especially girls. Boys could have adventure stories, but girls could not, sort of thing. And that was also the motivation behind Angela Brazel writing the schoolgirl stories the way she did. And that's why they got banned in a lot of places. Hers are later than these. Her ones got banned because it encouraged girls to have fun. There was always a good moral to the story, but it wasn't, and it was very obvious what the moral was. But it wasn't as preachy as a lot of the stories were back in the day, and so therefore people felt that they weren't good enough. And sadly, boys were given fun stories to read, but girls were not. It was just that people recognised earlier on that boys needed to have something that was a bit of fun, and they didn't ask the girls. They just sort of, no, they have to be good. Any bad that's going on is the girls' fault. You look at the criminal records back then and the stuff that women got blamed for when it was actually the men who were not making sure that they were behaving appropriately. Yeah. Anyway, that was just society back then. We still do it now in different ways. We'll carry on with the story. In a very clear, distinct, but yet cuckoo-y voice, he spoke. Now, I'm not going to try and do his cuckoo-y voice. Griselda, he said, are you truly sorry? Ooh. I don't know why it suddenly went out of focus. I told you I was, she replied, but I didn't feel so very naughty, Cuckoo. I didn't really. I was only vexed for 1 minute, and then when I threw the book, I seemed to be very little in fun too, and it made me so unhappy when you went away, and my poor aunts have been dreadfully unhappy too. If you hadn't come back, I should have told them tomorrow what I'd done. I would have told them before, but I was afraid it would have made them more unhappy. I thought I'd hurt you dreadfully. So you did, said the cuckoo. But you look quite well, said Griselda. It was my feelings, said the cuckoo, and I couldn't help going away. I have to obey orders like other people. Griselda started. How do you mean? She asked. Never mind, you can't understand at present, said the cuckoo. You can understand about obeying your orders, and you see, when you don't, things go wrong. Yes, said Griselda humbly, they certainly do. But Cuckoo, she continued, I never used to get into tempers at home, hardly ever, at least, and I liked my lessons then, and I never was scolded about them. It meant that she wasn't being stretched and challenged quite as much. What's wrong here, then? Said the cuckoo. It isn't often that things go wrong in this house. That's what Dorcas says, said Griselda. It must be my being a child. My aunts in the house and everything have got out of children's ways. About time they did, remarked the cuckoo dryly. And so, continued Griselda, it's really very dull. I have lots of lessons, but it isn't so much that I mind, it's that I've no one to play with. There's something in that, said the cuckoo. He flapped his wings and was silent for a minute or two. I'll consider about it, he observed at last. Thank you, said Griselda, not exactly knowing what else to say. And in the meantime, continued the cuckoo, you'd better obey present orders and go back to bed. Shall I say good night to you then? Asked Griselda somewhat timidly. You're quite welcome to do so, replied the cuckoo. Why shouldn't you? You see, I wasn't sure if you would like it, returned Griselda, for of course you're not like a person, and I've been told all sorts of queer things about what fairies like and don't like. Who said I was a fairy? Inquired the Cuckoo. Dorcas did, and of course my own common sense did too, replied Griselda. You must be a fairy, you couldn't be anything else. I might be a fairified cuckoo, suggested the bird. Griselda looked puzzled. I don't understand, and I don't think it would make much difference, but whatever you are, I wish you would tell me one thing. What? Said the Cuckoo. I want to know, now that you've forgiven me for throwing the book at you, have you come back for good? Certainly not for evil, replied the Cuckoo. Not at all what she was expecting him to answer. Yes, she is very sweet. Once she realises what she has, her own responsibility in the situation so far. Certainly not for evil, replied the Cuckoo. Griselda gave a little wriggle. Cuckoo, you're laughing at me, she said. I mean, have you come back to stay and cuckoo as usual and make my aunts happy again? You'll see in the morning, said the Cuckoo. Now go off to bed. Good night, said Griselda, and thank you, and please don't forget to let me know when you've considered. Cuckoo, cuckoo, was her little friend's reply. Griselda thought it was meant for good night, but the fact of the matter was that that exact second of time it was 2:00 in the morning. She made her way back to bed. She'd been standing some time talking to the Cuckoo, but though it was now well on in November, she did not feel the least cold nor sleepy. She felt as happy and light-hearted as possible, and she wished it was morning that she might get up. Yet the moment she laid her little brown curly head on the pillow, she fell asleep, and it seemed to her that just as she dropped off, a soft feathery wing brushed her cheek gently, and a tiny cuckoo sounded in her ear. When she woke, it was bright morning, really bright morning, for the wintry sun was already sending some clear yellow rays out into the pale grey-blue sky. It must be late, thought Griselda, when she had opened the shutters and seen how light it was. I must have slept a long time. I feel so beautifully unsleepy now. It's a good way to say not tired. Unsleepy. I like that. I must dress quickly. How nice it will be to see my aunts look happy again. I don't even care if they scold me for being late. But, after all, it was not so much later than usual. It was only a much brighter morning than they had had for some time. Griselda did dress herself very quickly, however. As she went downstairs, 2 or 3 of the clocks in the house, for there were several, were striking 8. These clocks must have been a little before the right time, for it was not till they had again relapsed into silence that there rang out from the anteroom the clear, sweet tones, 8 times repeated, of cuckoo. Miss Grizzle and Miss Tabitha were already at the breakfast table, but they received their little niece most graciously. Nothing was said about the clock, however, till about halfway through the meal, when Griselda, full of eagerness to know if her aunts were aware of the cuckoo's return, could restrain herself no longer. Aunt Grizzle, she said, isn't the cuckoo all right again? Yes, my dear, I'm delighted to say it is, replied Miss Grizzle. Did you put it right, Aunt Grizzle? Inquired Griselda slyly. Little girls should not ask so many questions, replied Miss Grizzle mysteriously. It is all right again, and that is enough. During 50 years that cuckoo has never, till yesterday, missed an hour. If you, in your sphere, my dear, do as well during 50 years, you won't have done badly. No, indeed, you won't have done badly, repeated Miss Tabitha. But though the 2 old ladies thus tried to improve the occasion by a little lecturing, Griselda could see that at the bottom of their hearts they were both so happy that even if she had been very naughty indeed, they could hardly have made up their minds to scold her. Hang on, we don't actually need the illustration right now. She was not at all inclined to be naughty this day. She had something to think about and look forward to, which made her quite a different little girl, and made her take heart in doing her lessons as well as she possibly could. I wonder what the cuckoo will have considered about I wonder when the cuckoo will have considered enough about my having no one to play with, she thought to herself as she was walking up and down the terrace at the back of the house. Okay, so now we know where the terrace is. It's behind the house. So it's probably the flat piece of paving that's outside the back windows and doors before the slope of the gardens. Caw, caw, screamed a rook just over her head, as if in answer to her thought. Griselda looked up at him. Your voice isn't half so pretty as the cuckoo's, Mr. Rook, she said. All the same, I dare say I should make friends with you if I understood what you meant. How funny it would be to know all the languages of the birds and the beasts, like the prince in the fairy tale. I wonder if I should wish for that if a fairy gave me a wish. No, I don't think I would. I'd far rather have the fairy carpet that would take you anywhere you liked in a minute. I'd go to China to see if all the people there look like Aunt Grizzle's mandarins, and I'd first of all, of course, go to Fairyland. She does need a puppy, or something, a puppy, a kitten, something. You must come in now, little missy, said Dorcas's voice. Miss Grizzle says you have had play enough, and there's a nice fire in the ante-room for you to do your lessons by. I wonder if it's because she started talking to the rook, and Auntie doesn't want her to find out anything. Play, repeated Griselda indignantly as she turned to follow the old servants. Do you call walking up and down the terrace play, Dorcas? I mustn't loiter even to pick a flower if there were any for fear of catching cold, and I mustn't run for fear of overheating myself. I declare, Dorcas, if I don't have some play soon, or something to amuse me, I think I'll run away. Nay, nay, missy, don't talk like that. You'd never do anything so naughty, and you so like Miss Sibylla, who was so good. She hasn't been told about Miss Sibylla. Really? Dorcas, I'm tired of being told I'm like Miss Sibylla, said Griselda impatiently. She was my grandmother. No one would like to be told they were like their grandmother. It makes me feel as if my face must be all screwy up and wrinkly, and as if I should have spectacles on and a wig. That is not like what Miss Sibylla was when I first saw her, said Dorcas. She was younger than you, missy, and as pretty as a fairy. Was she? Exclaimed Griselda, stopping short. Yes, indeed she was. She might have been a fairy, so sweet she was and gentle, and yet so merry. Every creature loved her, even the animals about seemed to know her as if she was one of themselves. She brought good luck to the house, and it was a sad day when she left it. I thought you said it was the cuckoo that brought good luck, said Griselda. Well, so it was. The cuckoo and Miss Sibylla came here the same day. It was left to her by her mother's father, with whom she had lived since she was a baby, and when he died she came here to her sisters. She wasn't own sister to my... She wasn't own sister to my ladies. I'm not sure. I'm going to read that again and we'll just accept it as being what's written. She wasn't own sister to my ladies, you see, missy. Her mother had come from Germany. It was in some strange place there where her grandfather lived that the cuckoo clock was made. They make wonderful clocks there, I've been told, but none more wonderful than our cuckoo, I'm sure. No, I'm sure not, said Griselda softly. Why didn't Miss Sibylla take it with her when she was married and went away? She knew her sisters were fond of it. It was like a memory of her left behind for them. It was like a part of her. And do you know, missy, the night she died soon after your father was born, a year after she was married. Yay, we get some backstory. For a whole hour from 12 to 1, that cuckoo went on cuckooing in a soft, sad way like some living creature in trouble. Of course, we did not know anything was wrong with her, and folks said something had caught some of the springs of the works, but I didn't think so and never shall, and... But here Dorcas's reminiscences were abruptly brought to a close by Miss Grizzle's appearance at the other end of the terrace. Griselda, what are you loitering so for? Dorcas, you should have hastened, not delayed, Miss Griselda. So Griselda was hurried off to her lessons and Dorcas to her kitchen. But Griselda did not much mind. She had plenty to think of and wonder about, and she liked to do her lessons in the ante-room with the tick-tick of the clock in her ears and the feeling that perhaps the cuckoo was watching her through some invisible peephole in his closed doors. And if he sees, thought Griselda, if he sees how hard I am trying to do my lessons well, it will perhaps make him be quick about considering. So she did try very hard, and she didn't speak to the cuckoo when he came out to say it was 4 o'clock. She was busy, and he was busy. She felt it was better to wait till he gave her some sign of being ready to talk to her again. For fairies, you know, children, however charming, are sometimes rather queer to have to do with. They don't like to be interfered with or treated except with very great respect. And they have their own ideas about what is proper and what isn't, I can assure you. I suppose it was working so hard at her lessons, most people say it was with having been up the night before, running about the house in the moonlight, but as she had never felt so fresh in her life as when she got up that morning, it could have hardly been that Griselda, that was a very long aside, so I suppose it was that Griselda felt so tired and sleepy that evening she could hardly keep her eyes open. She begged to go to bed quite half an hour earlier than usual, which made Miss Tabitha afraid again that she was going to be ill. But as there was nothing better for children than to go to bed early, even if they are going to be ill, Miss Grizzle told her to say good night and to ask Dorcas to give her a wineglass full of elderberry wine. Nice and hot after she was in bed. Griselda had no objection to the elderberry wine, though she felt she was having it on false pretences. She certainly did not need it to send her to sleep, for almost before her head touched the pillow she was as sound as a top. She had slept a good long while when she wakened suddenly, just as she had done the night before, and again with the feeling that something had wakened her. And the queer thing was that the moment she was awake she felt so very awake. She had no inclination to stretch and yawn and hope it wasn't time to get up and think how nice and warm the bed was and how cold it was outside. She sat straight up and peered out into the darkness, feeling quite ready for an adventure. "Is it you, Cuckoo?" she said softly. There was no answer. But listening intently, the child fancied she heard a faint rustling or fluttering in the corner of the room by the door. She got up and, feeling her way, opened it, and the instant she had done so she heard a few steps only in front of her, it seemed, the familiar notes, very, very soft, and whispered, "Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo." It went on and on down the passage, Griselda trotting after, so the cuckoo is leading her, with just very quietly saying cuckoo, with Griselda trotting after. There was no moon tonight. Heavy clouds had quite hidden it, and outside the rain was falling heavily. Griselda could hear it on the window panes, through the closed shutters and all, but dark as it was, she made her way along without any difficulty, down the passage, across the great saloon, in through the anteroom door, guided only by the little voice now and then to be heard in front of her. She came to a standstill right before the clock, and stood there for a minute or two, patiently waiting. She had not very long to wait. There came the usual murmuring sound, then the doors above the clock face opened. She heard them open. It was far too dark to see, and in his ordinary voice, clear and distinct, it was just 2 o'clock, so the cuckoo was killing 2 birds with 1 stone, telling the hour, and greeting Griselda at once. The bird sang out, "Cuckoo, cuckoo." "Good evening, Cuckoo," said Griselda when he had finished. "Good morning, you mean," said the cuckoo. "Good morning, then, Cuckoo," said Griselda. "Have you considered about me, Cuckoo?" The cuckoo cleared his throat. "Have you learnt to obey orders yet, Griselda?" he inquired. "I'm trying," replied Griselda. "But you see, Cuckoo, I've not had very long to learn, and it was only last night you told me, you know." The cuckoo sighed. "You've a great deal to learn, Griselda." "I dare say I have," she said, "but I can tell you one thing, Cuckoo. Whatever lessons I have, I couldn't ever have any worse than those addition sums of Mr. Kneebreeches. I have made up my mind about that for today. Do you know, Cuckoo?" "Yesterday," corrected the cuckoo. "Always be exact in your statements, Griselda." "Well, yesterday then," said Griselda rather tartly, "though when you know quite well what I mean, I don't see that you need to be so very particular. Well, as I was saying, I tried and tried, but still they were fearful. They were indeed." "You've a great deal to learn, Griselda." repeated the Cuckoo. I wish you wouldn't say that so often, said Griselda. I thought you were going to play with me. There's something in that, said the Cuckoo. There's something in that. I should like to talk about it, but we could talk more comfortably if you would come up here and sit beside me. Griselda thought her friend must be going out of his mind, because he's up in the clock. Sit beside you up there, she exclaimed. Cuckoo, how could I? I'm far, far too big. Big? Returned the Cuckoo. What do you mean by big? It's all a matter of fancy. Don't you know that if the world and everything in it, counting yourself, of course, were all made little enough to go into a walnut, you'd never find out the difference? Wouldn't I? Said Griselda, feeling rather muddled. But not counting myself, Cuckoo. I would then, wouldn't I? I'm getting confused now. Nonsense, said the Cuckoo hastily. You've a great deal to learn, and one thing is not to argue. Nobody should argue. It's a shocking bad habit and ruins the digestion. Come up here and sit beside me comfortably. Catch hold of the chain. You'll find you can manage if you try. But it'll stop the clock, said Griselda. Aunt Grizzle said I was never to touch the weights or the chains. Stuff, said the Cuckoo. It won't stop the clock. Catch hold of the chains and swing yourself up. There now. I told you you could manage it. And that's the end of the chapter. Oh, my goodness. So I'm going to read the next one. But we're going to go over time, just because of how long it is. Chapter 4. The Country of the Nodding Mandarins. And the epigram or epigraph is, we're all nodding, nodding. There's an illustration at the beginning of the chapter. It's like the garden behind the house, I guess. And then we have we've got the settler of headbands. Thank you so much, Shoo. And what are we going to have? What one are we going to have this time? Argos! And I know exactly where Argos is. I'm just having to untangle him from all the others. There's Argos for you. Good. And turn on the egg timer, which is there, and start it. If you haven't been here before, this runs for 6 minutes while I've got the headbands on to tell me when it's time to take them off. So we also have a illuminated letter, or whatever you call it. There you go, the H. Good, it finally focused. How she managed it, she never knew. Is that how Santa sees everything? Oh, with the sizes and scales and whether it fits or not. Possibly, yeah, actually. Or Argos with lots of eyes seeing everything. I don't know which one, but both of those I think actually apply. How she managed it, she never knew, but somehow or other it was managed. She seemed to slide up the chain just as easily as in a general way she would have slidden down, only without any disagreeable anticipation of a bump at the end of the journey. And when she got to the top, how wonderfully different it all looked from anything she could have expected. The doors stood open, and Griselda found them quite big enough, or herself quite small enough, which it was she couldn't tell, and as it was all a matter of fancy, she decided not to trouble to inquire. Fancy, imagination, to pass through quite comfortably, and inside there was the most charming little snuggery imaginable. It was something like a saloon railway carriage. It seemed to be all lined and carpeted and everything with rich mossy red velvet. There was a little round table in the middle and 2 armchairs, on one of which sat the Cuckoo, quite like other people, thought Griselda to herself, while the other, as he pointed out to Griselda by a little nod, was evidently for her. Thank you, she said, sitting down on the chair as she spoke. Are you comfortable? Inquired the Cuckoo. Quite, replied Griselda, looking about her with great satisfaction. Are all cuckoo clocks like this when you get inside them? She inquired. I can't think how there's room for this dear little place between the clock and the wall. Is it a hole cut out of the wall on purpose, Cuckoo? I thought she was just going to go with the fancy. Hush, said the Cuckoo. We've got other things to talk about. First, shall I lend you one of my mantles? You may feel cold. Oh, interesting. You may feel cold. He's not necessarily talking about now. I don't just know. I don't just now, replied Griselda, but perhaps I might. That's a good response. She looked at her little bare feet as she spoke and wondered why they weren't cold, for it was very chilblainy weather. Chilblains are those itchy bumps you get, especially on feet, but often on hands as well, when it gets really cold. And usually they're caused because that part of your body got really cold, and then when you were warming it up again, you warmed it up too fast, and then you get this itchy bump there, and it's maddeningly itchy. And those are chilblains. So it was very chilblainy weather. The cuckoo stood up and with one of his claws reached from a corner where it was hanging a cloak which Griselda had not before noticed, for it was hanging wrong side out, and the lining was red velvet, very like what the sides of the little room were covered with, so it was no wonder she'd not noticed it. Had it been hanging the right side out, she must have done so, for this side was so very wonderful. It was all feathers. Feathers of every shade and colour, but beautifully worked in somehow so as to lie quite smoothly and evenly, one colour melting away into another like those in a prism, so that you could hardly tell where one began and another ended. "What a lovely cloak," said Griselda, wrapping it around her and feeling even more comfortable than before as she watched the rays of the little lamp in the roof. I think I was forgetting to tell you that the cuckoo's boudoir was lighted by a dear little lamp set into the red velvet roof like a pearl in a ring, playing softly on the brilliant colours of the feather mantle. "It's better than lovely," said the cuckoo, "as you shall see. Now, Griselda," he continued in the tone of one coming to business, "now, Griselda, let us talk." "We have been talking," said Griselda, "ever so long. I am very comfortable. When you say let us talk like that, it makes me forget all I wanted to say. Just let me sit still and say whatever comes into my head." "That won't do," said the cuckoo. "We must have a plan of action." "Oh, what?" said Griselda. "You see, you have a great deal to learn," said the cuckoo triumphantly. "You don't understand what I say." "But I didn't come up here to learn," said Griselda. "I can do that down there." And she nodded her head in the direction of the anteroom table. "I want to play." "Just so," said the cuckoo. "That's what I want to talk about. What do you call play? Blind man's buff and that sort of thing?" "No," said Griselda, considering. "I'm getting rather too big for that kind of play. Besides, Cuckoo, you and I alone couldn't have much fun at blind man's buff. There'd be only me to catch you or you to catch me." "Oh, you would easily get more," said the cuckoo. "The mandarins would be pleased to join." "The mandarins?" repeated Griselda. "Why, Cuckoo, they're not alive. How could they play?" The cuckoo looked at her gravely for a minute and then shook his head. "Kids these days." Sorry, it doesn't say that, but that's what I'm imagining him thinking. "You have a great deal to learn," he said solemnly. "Don't you know that everything's alive?" "No," said Griselda, "I don't, and I don't know what you mean, and I don't think I want to know what you mean. I want to talk about playing." There you go. Bye-bye, Argos, and thank you, Shoo, for the redeem. Much appreciated. Itchy nose. Sorry. And then we'll carry on. Ectoma. Just take its visibility away. "I want to talk about playing." "Well," said the cuckoo, "talk." "What I call playing," pursued Griselda, "is... I have thought about it now, you see, and it is being amused. If you will amuse me, Cuckoo, I will count that you are playing with me." "How shall I amuse you?" inquired he. "Oh, that's for you to find out," exclaimed Griselda. "You might tell me fairy stories, you know. If you're a fairy, you should know lots. Or, oh yes, of course, that would be far nicer. If you are a fairy, you might take me with you to fairyland." Again the cuckoo shook his head. "That," said he, "I cannot do." "Why not?" said Griselda. "Lots of children have been there." "I doubt it," said the Cuckoo. "Some may have been, but not lots, and some may have thought they had been there, who haven't really been there at all. And as to those who have been there, you may be sure of one thing, they were not taken, they found their own way. No one ever was taken to Fairyland, to the real Fairyland. They may have been taken to the neighbouring countries, but not to Fairyland itself." "Ooh, that's an interesting distinction. And how is one ever to find one's way there?" asked Griselda. "That I cannot tell you either," replied the Cuckoo. "There are many roads there. You may find yours some day, and if ever you do find it, be sure you keep what you see of it well swept and clean, and then you may see further after a little while. Ah, yes, there are many roads and many doors into Fairyland." That concept is used in a book called The Valley of Song by Elizabeth Goudge, that there are many doors into Fairyland. "Doors?" said Griselda. "Are there any doors into Fairyland in this house?" "Several," said the Cuckoo, "but don't waste your time looking for them at present. It would be no use." "Then how will you amuse me?" inquired Griselda in a rather disappointed tone. "Don't you care to go anywhere except to Fairyland?" said the Cuckoo. "Oh, yes, there's lots of places I wouldn't mind seeing. Not geography sort of places. It would be like lessons to go to India and Africa and all those places. But queer places, like the mines where the goblins make diamonds and precious stones, and the caves down under the sea where the mermaids live. And, oh, I've just thought, now I'm so nice and little, I would like to go all over the Mandarin's palace and the great saloon." "That can be easily managed," said the Cuckoo. "But, excuse me for an instant," he exclaimed suddenly. He gave a spring forward and disappeared. Then Griselda heard his voice outside the doors. "Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo." It was 3:00. Still got to do his job, otherwise people will think there's something going on. The doors opened again to let him through, and he resettled himself on his chair. "As I was saying," he went on, "nothing could be easier, but that palace, as you call it, has an entrance on the other side as well as the one you know." "Another door, do you mean?" said Griselda. "How funny. Does it go through the wall, and where does it lead to?" "It leads," replied the Cuckoo, "it leads to the country of the nodding mandarins." "What fun!" said Griselda, clapping her hands. "Cuckoo, do let us go there. How can we get down? You can fly, but must I slide down the chain again?" "Oh dear, no," said the Cuckoo. "By no means. You have only to stretch out your feather mantle, flap it as if it was wings. So," he flapped his own wings encouragingly, "wish, and there you'll be." "Where?" said Griselda bewilderedly. Yes, I did say the word right. I was just rereading it. Yeah, bobblehead country. Before the days of bobbleheads, of modern bobbleheads. "Wherever you wish to be, of course," said the Cuckoo. "Are you ready? Here goes." Wait a moment," cried Griselda. "Where am I to wish to be?" "Bless the child," exclaimed the Cuckoo. "Where do you wish to be? You said you wanted to visit the country of the nodding mandarins." "Yes, but am I to wish first to be in the palace and the great saloon?" "Certainly," replied the Cuckoo. "That is the entrance to Mandarin land, and you said you would like to see through it, so you're surely ready now." "A thought has just struck me," said Griselda. "How will you know what o'clock it is, so as to come back in time to tell the next hour? My aunts will get into such a fright if you go wrong again. Are you sure we shall have time to go to the Mandarin's country tonight?" "It's going to be the same every night, every hour." "Time?" repeated the Cuckoo. "What is time?" "Ah, Griselda, you have a very great deal to learn. What do you mean by time?" "I don't know," said Griselda, feeling rather snubbed. "Being slow or quick, I suppose that's what I mean." "And what is slow and what is quick?" said the Cuckoo. "All a matter of fancy. If everything that's been done since the world was made till now was done over again in 5 minutes, you'd never know the difference." "Oh, Cuckoo, I wish you wouldn't," cried poor Griselda. "You're worse than sums. You do so puzzle me. It's like what you said about nothing being big or little, only it's worse." Where would all the days and hours be if there was nothing but minutes? Oh, Cuckoo, you said you'd amuse me and you do nothing but puzzle me. For some people, that is amusement. It was your own fault. Now you wouldn't get ready, said the Cuckoo. Now, here goes, flap and wish. Griselda flapped and wished. She felt a sort of rustle in the air. That was all. Then she found herself standing with the Cuckoo in front of the Chinese cabinet, the door of which stood open, while the mandarins on each side, nodding politely, seemed to invite them to enter. Griselda hesitated. And I think this is where I have the next illustration. Let's have a look. Yes, there you go. There is the Cuckoo with Griselda wearing the cloak or cape. And here's one of the nodding mandarins here. And then the other one's on this side by the doorpost. You can see the fan and their hand and one of their feet. Lovely. They're about to go in. That looks like a bird that she's wearing, and I think that's what it's meant to look like, is that whole, the way the feathers were all described. It was like it was actually a bird, and that's why she can fly. Nodding politely seemed to invite them to enter. Griselda hesitated. Go on, said the Cuckoo patronisingly. Ladies first. Doesn't need a head though. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering about. But that may be part of the story. I don't know. Griselda went on. To her surprise, inside the cabinet it was quite light, though where the light came from that illuminated all the queer corners and recesses and streamed out to the front where stood the mandarins, she could not discover. The palace was not quite as interesting as she'd expected. There were lots of little rooms in it, opening onto balconies, commanding, no doubt, a splendid view of the great salon, or saloon. There were ever so many little staircases leading to more little rooms and balconies, but it all seemed empty and deserted. I don't care for it, said Griselda, stopping short at last. It's all the same and there's nothing to see. I thought my aunts kept ever so many beautiful things in here and there's nothing. Come along then, said the Cuckoo. I didn't expect you'd care for the palace, as you called it. Much. Let's go out the other way. He hopped down a sort of little staircase near which they were standing, and Griselda followed him willingly enough. At the foot they found themselves in a vestibule, much handsomer than the entrance on the other side, and the Cuckoo crossed it, lifting one of his claws, and touched a spring in the wall. Instantly a pair of large doors flew open in the middle, revealing to Griselda the prettiest and most curious sight she had ever seen. A flight of wide, shallow steps led down from this doorway into a long, long avenue, bordered by stiffly growing trees, from the branches of which hung innumerable lamps of every colour, making a perfect network of brilliance as far as the eye could reach. Let's see if it's one that'll open. No, I wanted you to open the picture, not turn the page. No, I can't enlarge it. There is a picture, but it's not impressive. Oh, go back. There. I can't actually make it any bigger for you. I tried. It's a long, long avenue of trees. Oh, how lovely, cried Griselda, clapping her hands. It'll be like walking along a rainbow. Cuckoo, come quick. Stop, said the Cuckoo. We've a good way to go. There's no need to walk. Palanquin. He flapped his wings, and instantly a palanquin appeared at the foot of the steps. Now, a palanquin is a box with seats in it and windows, like a carriage, but smaller, that instead of having wheels and being pulled by an animal, is carried between poles. That's a palanquin. And that's what we saw at the front of that picture. He flapped his wings, and instantly a palanquin appeared at the foot of the steps. It was made of carved ivory and borne by 4 Chinese-looking figures with pigtails and bright-coloured jackets. A feeling came over Griselda. She was dreaming, or else that she had seen this palanquin before. She hesitated. Suddenly she gave a little jump of satisfaction. "I know," she exclaimed. "It's exactly like the one that stands under a glass shade on Lady Lavender's drawing-room mantelpiece. I wonder if it's the very one. Fancy me being able to get into it." She looked at the 4 bearers. Instantly they all nodded. "What do they mean?" asked Griselda, turning to the Cuckoo. "Get in," he replied. "Yes, I'm just going to get in," she said. "But what do they mean when they nod at me like that?" "They mean, of course, what I tell you. Get in," said the Cuckoo. "Why don't they say so then?" persisted Griselda, getting in, however, as she spoke. "Griselda, you have a very great—" began the Cuckoo, but Griselda interrupted him. "Cuckoo," she exclaimed, "if you say that again, I'll jump out of the palanquin and run away home to bed. Of course I've a great deal to learn. That's why I like to ask questions about everything I see. Now tell me, where are we going?" She's got a very good point, actually. "In the first place," said the Cuckoo, "are you comfortable?" "Very," said Griselda, settling herself down among the cushions. It was a change from the Cuckoo's boudoir. There were no chairs or seats, only a number of very, very soft cushions covered with green silk. There were green silk curtains all around too, which you could draw or not as you pleased, just by touching a spring. Griselda stroked the silk gently. It was not fuzzily silk, if you know what that means. It did not make you feel as if your nails wanted cutting, or as if all the rough places on your skin were being rubbed up the wrong way. Its softness was like that of a rose or pansy petal. Ah, the fuzzily silk? Magnify that. That's what some people find touching microfiber, especially the fleecy microfiber like cleaning cloths, feels like. And it's like fingernails on a chalkboard for them. I get that a bit, but PJ gets it a lot. But also velvet and stuff like that does it to him as well. So that's why some people don't like microfiber, that sort of thing. So she's talking about it's like the smooth silk, not the slightly textured stuff. "What nice silk," said Griselda. "I'd like a dress of it. I never noticed that the palanquin was lined so nicely," she continued, "for I suppose it is the one from Lady Lavender's mantelpiece. There couldn't be 2 exactly like each other." The Cuckoo gave a sort of whistle. "What a goose you are, my dear," he exclaimed. "Excuse me," he continued, seeing that Griselda looked rather offended. "I didn't mean to harm your feelings, but you won't let me say the other thing, you know. The palanquin from Lady Lavender's? I should think not. You might as well mistake one of those horrible paper roses that Dorcas sticks in her vases for one of your aunt's Gloire de Dijon, the particular roses that they're famous for growing. The palanquin from Lady Lavender's, a clumsy human imitation, not worth looking at." "I didn't know," said Griselda humbly. "Do they make such beautiful things in Mandarin land?" "Of course," said the Cuckoo. Griselda sat silent for a minute or two, but very soon she recovered her spirits. "Will you please tell me where we're going?" she asked again. "You'll see directly," said the Cuckoo. "Not that I mind telling you. There's to be a grand reception at one of the palaces tonight. I thought you'd like to assist at it. It'll give you some idea of what a palace is like. By the by, can you dance?" "A little," said Griselda. "Ah, well, I dare say you'll manage. I've ordered a court dress for you. It'll be all ready when we get there." "Thank you," said Griselda. In a minute or two the palanquin stopped. The Cuckoo got out and Griselda followed him. She found that they were at the entrance to a very much grander palace than the one in her aunt's saloon. The steps leading up to the door were very wide and shallow and covered with a gold-embroidered carpet. He's magic. I tell you, he's magic. Covered with a gold-embroidered carpet which looked as if it would be prickly to her bare feet, but which, on the contrary, when she trod upon it, felt softer than the softest moss. She could see very little besides the carpet, for at each side of the steps stood rows and rows of mandarins, all something like, but a great deal grander than the pair outside her aunt's cabinet, and as the Cuckoo hopped and Griselda walked up the staircase, they all in turn, row by row, began solemnly to nod. It gave them the look of a field of very high grass, through which anyone passing leaves for the moment a trail, till all the heads bob up again into their places. "What do they mean?" whispered Griselda. "It's a royal salute," said the cuckoo. A salute, said Griselda. I thought that meant kissing or guns. Hush, said the cuckoo, for by this time they must have arrived at the top. They had arrived at the top of the staircase. You must be dressed now. Two mandarini-looking young ladies with porcelain faces and three-cornered headdresses stepped forward and led Griselda into a small anteroom where lay waiting for her the most magnificent dress you ever saw. But how do you think they dressed her? It was all by nodding. They nodded to the blue and silver embroidered jacket, and in a moment it had fitted itself onto her. They nodded to the splendid scarlet satin skirt, made very short in front and very long behind, and before Griselda knew where she was, it was adjusted quite correctly. They nodded to the headdress and the sashes and the necklaces and bracelets, and forthwith they all arranged themselves. Last of all, they nodded to the dearest, sweetest little pair of high-heeled shoes imaginable, all silver and blue and gold and scarlet, and everything mixed up together, only they were rather a stumpy shape about the toes, and Griselda's bare feet were encased in them, and to her surprise, quite comfortably so. They don't hurt me a bit, she said aloud, yet they didn't look the least the shape of my foot. But her attendants only nodded, and turning round she saw the cuckoo waiting for her. He did not speak either, rather to her annoyance, but gravely led the way through one grand room after another to the grandest of all, where the entertainment was evidently just about to begin. And everywhere there were mandarins, rows and rows, who all set to work nodding as fast as Griselda appeared. She began to be rather tired of royal salutes, and was glad when, at last, in the profound silence, the procession, consisting of the cuckoo and herself and about half a dozen mandarins, came to a halt before a kind of dais, or raised seat, at the end of the hall. Upon this dais stood a chair, a throne of some kind, Griselda supposed it to be, and upon this was seated the grandest and gravest personage she had yet seen. "Is he the king of the mandarins?" she whispered. But the cuckoo did not reply. And before she had time to repeat the question, the very grand and grave person got down from his seat, and coming towards her offered her his hand, at the same time nodding, first once, then 2 or 3 times together, then once again. Griselda seemed to know what he meant. He was asking her to dance. "Thank you," she said. "I can't dance very well, but perhaps you won't mind." The king, if that was his title, took not the slightest notice of her reply, but nodded again, once, then 2 or 3 times together, then once alone, just as before. Griselda did not know what to do, when suddenly she felt something poking her head. It was the cuckoo. He had lifted his claw and had tapped her head to make her nod, so she nodded once, twice together, then once. That appeared to be enough. The king nodded once again, an invisible band suddenly struck up the loveliest music, and off they set to the places of honour reserved for them in the centre of the room, where all the mandarins were assembling. What a dance it was! It began like a minuet and ended something like the haymakers. So it began as a formal dance and a ballroom style of dance, and a haymaker is a country dance, a casual, relaxed, more of a romp. Griselda had not the least idea what the figures or steps were. Figures are the movements you make on the floor with where you move to and around each other. Not the least idea what the figures or steps were, but it did not matter. If she did not know her shoes or something about her did, for she got on famously. The music was lovely, so the mandarins can't be deaf, though they are dumb, thought Griselda, which is one good thing about them. The king seemed to enjoy it as much as she did, though he never smiled or laughed. Anyone could have seen he liked it by the way he whirled and twirled himself about, and between the figures, when they stopped to rest a little, Griselda got on very well too. There was no conversation, or rather, if there was, it was all nodding. So Griselda nodded too, and though she did not know what her nods meant, the king seemed to understand and be quite pleased, and when they had nodded enough, the music struck up again, and off they set, harder than before. And every now and then tiny little mandarini boys appeared with trays filled with the most delicious fruits and sweetmeats. Sweetmeats, in this context, are candy type things, like marzipan fruits and other things like that, treats. Griselda was not a greedy child, but for once in her life she really did feel rather so. I cannot possibly describe these delicious things. Just think of whatever in all your life was the most lovely thing you ever ate, and you may be sure they tasted like that. Only the cuckoo would not eat any, which was rather distressed Griselda. He walked about among the dancers apparently quite at home, and the mandarins did not seem at all surprised to see him, though he did look rather odd, being nearly, if not quite, as big as any of them. Griselda hoped he was enjoying himself, considering that she had to thank him for all the fun she was having, but she felt a little conscience-stricken when she saw he wouldn't eat anything. "Cuckoo," she whispered. She dared not talk out loud. Would have seemed so remarkable, you see. "Cuckoo," she said very, very softly, "I wish you would eat something. You'll be so tired and hungry." "No, thank you," said the cuckoo, and you can't think how pleased Griselda was at having succeeded in making him speak. "It isn't my way. I hope you're enjoying yourself." "Oh, very much," said Griselda. "Hush," said the cuckoo, and looking up, Griselda saw a number of mandarins in a sort of procession coming her way. Their way. When they got up to the cuckoo, they set to work nodding, 2 or 3 at a time, more energetically than usual. When they stopped, the cuckoo nodded in return and then hopped off toward the middle of the room. "They're very fond of good music, you see," he whispered as he passed Griselda, "and they don't often get it." And that's the end of the chapter. What's going to happen next? I have no idea. The next chapter is chapter 5, and it's called Pictures. And the epigram or epigraph, or whichever it is, says, "And she was always beautiful and always is 18. It's not the dancing princesses, but it is someone going off and having a dance in the middle of the night. I have no idea what's going on with this story. Where is it going to go? We're about a bit over a third of the way through, I think. I do want to see if I can get the illustrations that are in this book and then put those ones and the ones that I've got that I was showing you up here into the Discord server. I don't know if I actually already have a channel for Mrs. Molesworth. If I don't, I will make one. If I do, I will put them in there. So there you go. That's how it works. And if you haven't joined the Discord server yet, then you can do so. Here you go, Discord. There's the link for it. You will have to answer some questions and then wait for me to approve your application to join. If you have been here before and chatted with us and all that sort of stuff, there'll be no trouble with that. If you haven't, then I'm probably going to ask you some more questions to find out a little bit more about who you are and why you're joining. And if you are someone who's trying to sell art, and that's the only reason that you're joining, 2 points. 1, DMs aren't permitted between members where the only thing they have in common is my server, and 2, we don't do that around here because we don't use other people's Discord servers as our spam email lists. Okay, there you go. Yes, it is a very cute story. She is going to learn the things she needs to learn, but she's going to have fun along the way. And I like the sort of stories where the kids learn something from it, but it's not just hard lessons the whole time. Those are a bit boring. So I look forward to seeing you all next time. We'll have some more of this. What's today? Monday. I will be reading some more of this one on Wednesday, unless for some reason I'm not here. And then possibly on Friday or possibly next Monday, depending on how we're doing with the book. I will probably give you a little bit of information about the Palia update, because I know there is one. It's a wintry one. They're going to have snow all over the place in Palia, or the valley anyway, Kalima Valley, and also the free update for Disney Dreamlight Valley. I don't know if I'm going to play that on Friday because it'll be available to me on Friday, or if I'm going to play that on my next stream after that, which will be the Monday. So we'll just see how it goes, okay? But I look forward to seeing you all next time. Look after yourself.